Greetings, Guardians. My name is Bife here. So it's been well over a week or two, and I think it's a fair margin spoiler-wise to discuss one of the most important topics this season. Eris Morn's demise, and then her return, within what appears to be a throne world. This reveal was, of course, an absolutely critical one for the story of Destiny, Heresy, and our great champion against the Hive. But it also raised a lot of questions and a little bit of confusion, including with myself. So today, I'm going to try and clear things up and discuss some of the possibilities. We don't know what's happening exactly, but we can make a few educated guesses. So, a quick refresher, maybe not so quick depending on how much there is to talk about, but for those of you who don't know, what is a throne world? Well, it's a pocket dimension, a cyst in the Ascendant Plane created by the use of incredible paracausal power. Throne worlds can be made by anyone with sufficient power at their disposal, and Mara and Riven proved that you can even make one out of light. But as a general rule of thumb, throne worlds tend to be made with the powers of darkness, and it's the Hive who have mastered the art of creating them. Oryx, Crota, Savathûn, Xivu Arath, all of these major Hive gods have or had throne worlds, and presumably so do many other Ascendant Hive, albeit that their throne worlds are probably much smaller in size. The purpose of a throne world is multifaceted. For one, they act as a bridge between any real-world locale occupied by the Hive and the Ascendant Plane. This makes throne worlds one of the ultimate logistical tools in a war, as Hive armies can muster within the Ascendant Plane at throne worlds, and can then appear where required in real space to fight their enemies. But of course, this is not their primary function, their best known purpose. Throne worlds are predominantly used for the same reason that a lich, in a typical fantasy setting, has a phylactery. Throne worlds are a means of cheating death. Take a listen to how Savathûn describes it in the Books of Sorrow.
Oryx, my brother and king, I have studied the wounds caused by the worm, our god. Also, I have studied the manner of your death and return. These two things are the same, for they are predicated on death and the passage through cut spaces. Let us practice the sword logic until we are sharp. We may then cut our own wounds and step through.
Sister, I am already sharp. Look, my sword cuts into another space.
Kudos, by the way, to the narrative team for deciding to make it so that the Hive gods had their memories just all over the Dreadnought. That's really cool, and it's engaged a lot of people for the first time with the Books of Sorrow. So, that's neat. Anyway, the Hive have been able to create such places with the help of the sword logic and the very real power that it grants them. More importantly, when the Hive die in real space, as Oryx did when he was betrayed by Savathûn on the sterile moon of Fundament, they are returned to their throne world and do not die permanently. When the owner of a throne world returns to it after their death, they can recover, and in all likelihood, they will need to. This is not simply because the process of death and rebirth is a taxing one, but also because any entity capable of killing an individual with a throne world is bound to have enough power to cause some pretty serious damage to their foe. For the Hive, there's a further problem, as being defeated in battle in such a way ensures that their worm will grow hungrier. In doing so, the Hive god is inevitably forced to return to the field and satiate their worm's hunger with bloodshed. In the worst of circumstances, like those that the Hive faced against the Ecumene, this can result in a vicious, destructive cycle. An Ascendant Hive dies and is weakened, but is then forced to return to the battle in their weakened state, where they are more easily killed again. Repeat this enough times and a Hive god's worm can technically be starved to the point that it is forced to consume the Hive god, leaving them defeated permanently. All this might sound simple, but the reality is that getting to this point is anything but. Hive gods and the lesser Ascendant Hive that might also have throne worlds are amongst some of the most dangerous enemies humanity and the Guardians can face, and the challenge of killing a Hive god under any circumstances is one that few Guardians other than ourselves have ever been able to accomplish. For that matter, I think it's only us and Eris Morn who are confirmed to have killed any Hive gods. I know Lord Shaxx is rumoured to have killed some thanks to the lore of Into the Light, but we have no confirmation from a second source to verify this. Any hive capable of creating a throne world will have done so because they are sufficiently powerful, but in the process of becoming as powerful as that, they will gain the ability to command armies, forge weapons of terrible darkness, and draw upon ancient spells and rituals. Hive gods and the Ascendant Hive have also likely been existing for thousands of years and have faced hundreds of decisive battles, each one of which has honed their skills until their supremacy is assumed, if not assured. But if you can kill a hive god and send it back to its throne world, you can hopefully follow it inside before killing it a second time, and this time when you kill it, you'll kill it for good. If a throne world's owner is killed within the throne world's confines, their death is permanent. The only known way to avoid this is with another form of immortality or protection against death. In Savathun's case, the one example that exists, that is her ghost, Imaru. Needless to say, this makes Savathun one of the most powerful hive in existence, if that wasn't already apparent with the size of her throne world. By the way, that's a great way to tell how powerful a throne world's owner really is. If it's a small spit of land, such as the one created by Toland, you can tell that they're relatively weak. On the other hand, if the throne world is a massive sprawling fortress with hundreds of chambers surrounded by entire biomes, then the strength that is on display there is readily apparent. Look at the thrones of Savathun and Oryx to see what I mean. So that's kind of a refresher on throne worlds, but this all needs to tie back into Eris. So what about Eris? Well, after she was impaled by the subjugator in the first mission of the story, we saw the light fade from her eyes, and for a time, it seemed like that was it. But then, of course, this happened. So Eris Morn wakes up and it appears that she's still alive somewhere. The architecture is clearly hive in nature, and as she removes her bandage and looks upon it with her own eyes, she begins to laugh. The obvious conclusion that one can draw from this is that Eris does indeed have a throne world, hence why she's still alive. But I wanted to discuss some potential roadblocks to that idea and talk a little about the potential possibilities. Some of you might remember the season of the Witch, when Eris ascended to become the hive god of vengeance. It's this moment in her story that I think really creates a lot of these questions, and also potentially provides some answers. When Eris became a hive god, she was able to defeat Xivu Arath by banishing her from her own throne world. In order to do this, she had to kill Savathun and absorb all of her power. This moment is critical, I think, because instead of ascending to rule over the whole of the Hive Pantheon, Eris instead chose an action that was antithetical to the sword logic, aka banishing Xivu instead of killing her. In the process of doing so, she gave up all the power she had obtained, and she became mortal once again. The problem with this is that by forfeiting the sword logic's power in such a manner, it logically might throw a spanner in the works of any potential plan Eris could have had to build her own throne world. Now, is that guaranteed to have happened? I don't know. The construction of throne worlds is something that is talked about in the lore, but only ever in vague terms. Nothing is specifically talked about. I don't know if it's possible for someone to accidentally create a throne world, or to create one unintentionally. Whilst they clearly can be grown and expanded in a manner described by Savathun in the Books of Sorrow, it isn't clear if they can shrink or be destroyed in a corresponding manner. We know from Crota's throne world and Oryx's dreadnought that they are likely to decay and go dark, but we don't know what other effects there might be. Regardless, I think that if this is Eris's throne world, then it was probably created from that singular act in the Season of the Witch, the murder of Savathun, the Witch Queen. When Eris did this and absorbed Savathun's power, she briefly became the most powerful hive god in all history. Such a moment might well have been enough for a throne world to spontaneously be created, only to be left to stagnate moments after, as Eris returned to her mortal self. Now, is this the only possibility? Well, no, I don't think that it is. I will, however, grant that what I'm about to discuss is complete guesswork, and honestly, so is everything that I've said before this. It is very much speculation in the extreme. Throne worlds generally are merely the best guess that we have, not a guaranteed answer. We don't even know if what I'm about to talk about is possible, but I thought it was worth mentioning. If Eris has been returned to life, but she never knowingly built a throne world, is it perhaps possible that this throne world she stands in was inherited from someone else? Simply put, she was the one who was responsible for the death of many hive gods. We might have struck the killing blow, but she was the one to wield us like a knife. We essentially did her bidding, and in the process we killed Oryx and Crota. We also served as her acolytes during the Season of the Witch, and helped her claim the power she needed to banish Xivu Arath. So, what if the throne world she's standing in belongs to one of them? Could this be Crota's Oversoul throne? Oryx's throne world in the Dreadnought's inner reaches? Or maybe Xivu Arath's Black Terrace? But if that is the case, how is that even possible? I think Toland might have an answer to all this. Simply put, he has always been going on about the idea that the very architecture of these spaces demands that there must always be a strongest one. As Guardians, we walked away from the Taken King's throne after following Eris's instructions and putting Oryx to the sword in the King's Fall raid. We did the same with Crota, and we did the same with Xivu Arath. My thought is, what if Eris didn't know about it because she never intended to claim the space, but was instead sort of claimed by it in return? This isn't to say that the throne worlds are sentient. It's to say that maybe the architecture of these spaces might have somehow defaulted to folding themselves into her influence due to the scope of her power and the devastation that she brought to the Osmium dynasty. In other words, to the victor go the spoils. There is no law truly that supports this theory. So why am I talking about it? After all, it is entirely likely that this is an impossibility and that I am barking up the wrong tree. But I entertain the idea for a single reason. Simply put, when Eris reawakens, she seems surprised and delighted. I have no idea why, but I'm willing to entertain the possibility that her laughter is purely because she's woken up and realized she's inside one of the vacated throne worlds of her enemy. My personal belief here is that if she did take over a throne world, it might have been that of Xivu Arath. I say that partly because we don't know what Xivu's throne world looks like, and I think we've not seen the area she woke up in either. So, let's make the assumption that Eris Morn has a throne world, be it her own or someone else's. Our next question is, how the hell do we get her out of there? The reality is that the answer seems to be a lot more complicated than you might first expect. Throne worlds are pocket dimensions, and ingress points to them are well guarded or obscured. The Hive tend to build gateway portals that allow them to reach the throne worlds of their gods. In some instances, though, there are other ways to gain ingress. Empowering a god enough will allow them to step out of their throne world, or to create a pathway through the Ascendant Plane to real space. This is a favorite trick of Xivu Arath in particular, who feeds off of acts of war to bring her fleets into orbit around worlds that her brood invades. Often she will allow them to conduct a great act of war which makes them believe they are victorious, only for them to seal their fate. This is exactly what happened with Keitel at Tora Bartel. If Eris still technically retains her mantle as the Hive God of Vengeance, then it's possible that she also could be empowered to leave her throne world by a great act of revenge. That perhaps points us to a major plot point of the episode. If we manage to find the subjugator that murdered Eris, whose name I believe is Keter, and then kill her as an act of vengeance, perhaps we'll empower Eris enough for her to cut her way out of her throne world and return to us. That might well be the easiest option because the alternatives include finding a means of interdimensional travel. No big deal, right? But there are ways of doing this, and, well, I'm gonna sound like a broken record here, but if you've watched any of my lore videos, yes, it's time, take a drink. A113 and the Cocytus Apertures are the best way to do this kind of interdimensional travel. The gateways were once controlled by Crota, and as best we know, they linked into his Ascendant Plane. Now, as best we know, they are still in the possession of the Nine. Failing the Cocytus Apertures or some other gateway presenting itself, there are likely to be entities that can allow us to access the Ascendant Plane, but we'd probably be looking at very strange entities with remarkable power. For example, when Mara made her throne world, she used her own power along with Riven's wish magic to augur the point that would become the Blind Well and power the gateway into Mara's throne. The Blind Well is a paracausal device specifically designed to use Guardian's power to bridge the gap into the Ascendant Plane, but it specifically charts its course along the Ascendant Plane's ley lines, so it's no guarantee that it would take us in the direction we'd need to go if we wanted to use that to find Eris. There are specific gateways built by the Hive that lead into specific throne worlds, for example in the Court of Oryx and the stills at the bottom of the Hellmouth that respectively lead into Oryx's and Crota's throne worlds. But the reality is that we don't know if any of these gateways would be the ones we're looking for, because what if Eris isn't in either of those core throne worlds? And of course, there is no guarantee that they could be changed to link to Eris's if it's her own. Then there's the question that we still have yet to answer, which is what about Eris's body here in the real world? It's likely been interred or buried, but what happens when Eris returns from her throne world? This is a question that we just don't know because it's never technically been answered. When Crota tried to manifest himself back from his throne world, he was forced to reside within a Hive crystal until Hive wizards completed a ritual that would summon him back properly. Until then, he was just a set of glowing green eyes staring out at us from within the lattice. There is no telling what would happen to Eris's body in a similar state. Is it possible that it would simply dissolve? We've never seen something like this happen. The body has always been directly resurrected in front of us, so the continuity has never truly been broken. The summary of all of this and the short version is that if Eris is alive, and if we want to bring her back, we're going to need to seek out some rather unpredictable power and steel ourselves for a journey into the beyond. Of course, there is also one other way to access the Ascendant Plane, one that invokes an older power, one written by Oryx long ago as he carved his own way into the deep, one written in ruin that let Oryx step out into the abyss as the tablets he wrote on became stones beneath his feet. A way that lies in your possession. Yet again, the Tablet of Ruin might present its opportunities to us. And if it does, I wager we're in for a very interesting journey into the Ascendant Plane. We might go out there seeking Eris, but we might find something else entirely. Anyway, that's all from me for now. Thank you so much for watching the video. If you enjoyed, go ahead and leave a like and leave your own thoughts down below in the comments section. And if you want more content from universes near and far, go ahead and hit subscribe and the bell next to subscribe to turn on those email notifications. But as per usual, know that your viewership, as always, is quite enough for me. And that in the meantime, my name is Bife. Perodacia ad Astra. I'll see you Starside.